This is the eLearning Podcast, episode number 22.
For brick and mortar universities of a place, right, is that the place around the university provides a culture that is attractive for a student to become immersed in. And whether that's in New York City and just being immersed in New York City, or that's in London and being immersed in London, or being in Washington and being part of politics.
Welcome to the eLearning Podcast from lmspulse.com. My name is Stephen Laddick, and I'm the director at LMS Pulse. My guest for today's episode is Rob Kelley. He's an assistant professor at the American University School of International Service, a thoughtful educator, a technologist, and a humanitarian, and honestly, a longtime friend of mine. As a university professor, Rob has had a unique early experience with virtual education paradigms. Much like the beginning of the internet, Rob witnessed and lived through the early boom and almost utopian promise of a virtually free knowledge superhighway and how reality slowly tempered our expectations. Nevertheless, Rob continues to remain optimistic about the future of tech-enabled learning. In this reporting from the trenches kind of conversation, Rob and I talk about why Rob has always believed there's an inherent link between education and uncertainty about the future that we should never set aside, and how 2020 definitely proved him right. We also talk about why flexibility is a desirable skill among educators, not necessarily because of the technology, but because of the students and our growing appreciation for their diversity. We also talk about the value around the personalization of learning management systems, not just for school branding, but also as a reflection of an organization's own learning process. We also talk about why some of the things people dislike about virtual learning are not technology glitches, but actually positive features that are evolving our understanding of education, and why fixes might end up becoming setbacks. And finally, we talk about why there are elements of the university as a place and as an experience that online learning can never replace, which should make us question why we insist on comparing real apples to virtual oranges. But before we get started, a quick word from our sponsors.
The eLearning Podcast is sponsored by the eLearning Success Summit. Learn from more than 40 experts how to teach, work, and learn online without being overwhelmed. Get your free ticket to the summit at elearningsuccesssummit.com. And lmspulse.com, your best source for news, information, and resources for e-learning professionals for more than 10 years. Get our free roundup of the week's top news at lmspulse.com.
Hi there, Rob. Welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you, Stephen?
You know, Rob, I love that you're in the bunker. It looks like we were talking about it pre-show, but I love that you're in the bunker. It's fantastic. I mean, I'm here in what looks like, the Bangkok Towers, but we all know that's not true. But
I'm deep underground and I'm ready for everything. I'm even ready for a snowstorm.
Yeah. So we're recording this at the top of June in 2020. Just give me a sense. Where are you sitting right now? Everybody knows I'm in Bangkok, Thailand, at least for the next couple weeks before we transition out. That's going to be a story all in itself. But where are you sitting? What's the universe? Just the quick snapshot look for you.
Sure. Well, you've caught me on the coast of Maine, not far from the city of Portland, which is Maine's largest city. And this is where my home life is based. Mm-hmm. But my work life is based 600 miles away in Washington, D.C., where I have not been since March the 4th. And God only knows what's living in my mini fridge now.
Exactly. And again, perfect for this conversation that your office is 600 miles away. That's amazing.
Yes.
So you are, I'll give you your formal time, Professor Robert Kelley. You are an assistant professor at American University, the School of International Service. Full disclosure to everyone who's listening, I've known Rob for going on 20 years now. We have a long history, but one that is, followed one another across the planet as we've, sort of done many different things. But Rob is one of the most, I wanted to have him on the show because he's just got this incredible perspective on what e-learning is all about from the higher education universe. Not only has he been doing it, but he's in it. He's in the trenches. But Rob, why don't you just give a little background, like little professional background about where, who you are, where you're sitting, and what you've been doing for the last, several years.
Sure. So I've been in the world of higher education, as many of us were students. I went on to pursue a career in higher education, and I've been in this career now for, getting like past 15 years, and soon to be 20 years. And it's been a fascinating time to, catch a wave in higher education. The wave has not necessarily been a pleasant one. What you're facing when you get into this line of work these days is a lot of uncertainty, which already existed across higher education about the future and about just what it means to be in this line of work. Just because the forces around higher education have been they've loomed over us for so long. And the one thing I'll say about this is, higher education is like an express lane to success in life. That's always the way it's been interpreted, and it's always been viewed that way by people who want to get into the world of higher education. I'm not talking about people who are working in it like me. I'm talking about people who want to
students. This is how you lift yourself up, right?
Right. And so, one thing that occurs to me, and we're talking at a time when we are acutely aware of inequality in the world, the murder of George Floyd, and also the inequality that's been revealed with the way that the COVID-19 crisis has been handled across societies. And I think, it's hard not to notice that higher education as an elite, collection of institutions together, providing that express lane, has been insulated from a lot of the changes bearing down on it right now. Somehow it's managed to kind of keep that in-person quality relatively intact. The traditional forms of membership and being present, and the Socratic method, and ivory towers and cities on hills, and whatever you want to say about it, it's been relatively insulated by this. But just little by little, the forces of change have been creeping in on it and forcing its hand to respond. So that's what I'm noticing around me, and it's of course it's anybody's guess how this is all going to turn out, but it's going to look very different, I think, than it did on March the 3rd, which is the last time I was in my office.
Wow. So give me a little bit of credit. You've taught online for a while now, not as your sole offering, right? You still you've been going to DC. You lived in DC for a long time, where American University is based, and then you made the choice to sort of be a little distant, so you commute back and forth. When did you first get online, and how have you seen, let's just start there. Have you seen it evolve over the last 5, 7, 10 years? I'm not sure exactly how long it's been.
Yeah, I've been teaching online now for about 10 years. And when we say teaching online, I think it's important to distinguish a few things. Like, first of all, there's an online component to everyone's teaching now. Long gone are the days. Rarely will you find the course pack, the course pack that we used to have a long time ago, of printed material that you would go buy or make copies of or whatever.
And if you do get that, you should probably run away.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Right.
And then of course, on top of that is just course management has changed dramatically too. Every institution has a learning management system, a course management system, it seems, of whatever branding, and then students. It's not just an access point to get to their professors by email. It's an expectation, really, that all the communication can take place anytime between the student and the professor. It's not just limited to the in-person class and the office hours the way that it was. So there's always been, I mean, for a long time now, there's been an online component to the job. But what's markedly different now is that that in the past 10, 15 years, we've seen whole courses migrate to the online world, and that the relationship that you maintain with students throughout that process looks very different than the one that you have in class. And so you have to adapt as a professor. You have to find a way to still reach students. When I was starting my online experience, it was really an eye-opening thing to discover for me, just how much effort had to go in to adapting your pedagogy, your pedagogical style, away from the thing that you were comfortable with in the classroom, so that it could work online. You're still in the act of transmitting information and trying to educate and evaluate, but now you've got to do all this without being present with students in a place. And beyond that, it's not just being present with students in a place, it's also not being present with students at a time. The courses that I teach are not just virtual, but they're also asynchronous. They're all happening out of time. So you never meet with all students virtually at the same time either.
So is that so many questions? I love that you've put on the table right here, like, let's just pull apart the whole class online versus what we would call blended learning, right? I mean, you're doing, well, even right now, you're not doing blended learning right now, but blended learning would be a mix of online component, do it yourself, get it done, but then let's come back together, have a plenary, have a class where we either discuss or we present or we talk, and you're actually physically present. But has most of your stuff been blended up to this stage, and now it's all online, or how's that work? You said it was asynchronous, so no one ever came together?
No one ever came together. No one has come together in my asynchronous classes. The distinction that is drawn between these various formats of teaching, there is the in-person method of being in the classroom. There's the blended version where there's part in class, and then a large part of it is done online. And then there's the or what they call the hybrid model. And then there's also just like pure online. All of us in the world of higher education who do educating became a blended model, right? At the very least, if we weren't doing online. I was doing online teaching on top of it, had a master's course that I was doing, and then all of my in-person courses became online courses. So we all had 8 or 9 weeks of getting to know each other in the classroom, and then after that, the jarring change, and then moving the whole class online. So that is what we would call the blended version, right? Where we've gotten to know each other, we've actually physically been in the room at the same time, and now it proceeds online. So yeah, I guess you could say now a lot of us have had experience with the blended version, but still many more of us have yet to have the pure online experience.
Sure. Have you, has American, or just you with your kind of cohort of colleagues that you talk with on a regular basis, is there any discussion now about sort of the automated courses, for like the MOOCs, that are out there and are now seeing a resurgence these days? And what I'm talking about is, hey, go pay $25.99 for my course on how to use PowerPoint, or how to use X, Y, and Z, or Socrates, right? You kind of take one subject, you break it down into one thing, you go and you pay it, and here's, you're going to go kind of step by step through videos or through something like that. There's really never any interaction, and it's supposed to be just sort of information delivery. Is there discussion about that? Whereas, what you're delivering right now is a facilitated learning process. So where you can actually be hands-on, you can answer questions, you can guide it. There's obviously a syllabus of learning outcomes that you're trying to achieve, but you're there physically present and it happens in real time. Whereas like in a MOOC or some other online settings, they're truly asynchronous. I can go and sign up for one tomorrow and somebody else could sign up for it in 3 weeks from now. It's the same content. We go through the same process. Do you see where my question is going? Is there discussion about that in your building, or?
I'll just come out and say it, and that there's an emphatic no on that, and I'll tell you why. It's several years. No, I was going to say several years ago, our provost at the time, being aware of the gathering storm, MOOCs and master's programs going online, and courses that you could subscribe to in the same way that you might subscribe to a magazine or a newspaper, but then you get a credential for having accomplished it. Those courses themselves need to be credentialed in order to have any kind of merit. But for a university like mine, and I think this is not unique to our university, that is so enmeshed in an identity that has a certain notion of place, right? Mm-hmm. That
you
because
come to the campus, you come to the building. There's a true value in the physical place.
Right. That the large part of the value proposition for brick and mortar universities of a place, right, is that the place around the university provides a culture that mm-hmm. is attractive for a student to become immersed in. Mm-hmm. And whether that's in New York City and just being immersed in New York City, or that's in London and being immersed in London, or being in Washington and being part of politics,
or South Bend, Indiana for Notre Dame, or UCLA right. and you're in LA, or what you're Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great. I haven't heard that argument. It's been there the whole time, obviously, but that's one of the huge arguments. It's not just the institution; it's
the ecosystem. So I think part of the conundrum, the dilemma that a university like mine is facing is there is no way to really replace that experience, right? The technology to this point cannot replace 100% the experience of coming to Washington, D.C. So anything short of that is going to be a disappointment for students who anticipate and expect coming to a university like mine and reaping the benefits of being in that place, and removing that from the equation is for many a deal breaker, right? I mean, all I keep hearing about from students who are they're just not assured of what the fall is going to look like, so it's on the table that they just won't come back. That doesn't mean they're going to drop out. What it means is that they're just going to take some time off until
it's the great gap year. This is the great gap year.
Yeah, right. That's right. And I'm hearing that's a refrain I've heard over and over again, is just kind of coming back to this as a recourse in the event that the Washington part of this whole experience is denied. So that's why a university like mine is not taking the MOOC conversation all that seriously, because MOOC is really antithetical to what the university lays out in terms of a value proposition. It's kind of like a capitulation, okay, we're going to give into this whole wave of MOOCs. Don't come to Washington. What we're going to offer is we're going to just jump into the fray with every other university that's providing classes and
catalogs, literally catalogs of classes, right? I mean, there's huge catalogs. You just go to MIT's open online university, right? I mean, there's catalogs of courses. Yes. You're not going to get a certificate out of that, I don't think. Don't quote me on that. You're not going to get a degree. I haven't looked at it in a while, but
no, you don't. I mean, if you remember the general public,
super powerful argument. I mean, because then you've really just detached the conversation away from what are you going to learn technically,
Yeah.
right? What are you going to learn as actual sort of knowledge progression in terms of engineering, medicine, philosophy, whatever it is, and how is that then going to be based, and how are you going to grow and evolve as an individual because of the environment, because of the place you chose, right? I mean, this now, I'm so glad we stumbled here, because it begs that question of loyalty to the brand, right? Loyalty to the place. I mean, how many people are 50-year alumni of a university and they're still going to the college football games, right? Or these kinds of things, because it forms so much of who you are, or it has the potential to. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. But I'll say I would look at it a little differently than the way you've explained it, just by saying it not even so much about being wedded to the place, but just wedded to the abstract notion of a place, that there is something calling you back to the campus, or calling you to the campus, which is appealing, and it has, it has an identity, it has a character, and a certain kind of landscape, a literal landscape that you can locate all of these growth experiences that you see yourself in for when you enroll in a university like that. And so and this is true, again, like this is true of an urban university. This is true of a university that's in a more remote setting, but everything is about the university, right? That's what's happening in that remote part of
CSU, where I did my undergrad, Colorado State University. The town literally expands and collapses according to the semester, right? I mean, it goes, it's when I was there forever ago, it went from a town of 50, 60,000 people to a town of 120,000 or 200,000 people and back, right? It's such a large organ within like that college town that it just absolutely changes. It changes the feel and everything, and you go there for that experience. Moving us down that path a little bit, the road to the ivory tower is an important one. People choose to go on that road, and they want to go there because you make that choice. You're like, I'm going to go there because I want that experience. That road has now been, or at least for the last 3 or 4 months, literally cut off. I mean, chopped off at his knees. The police have put up the borders and just said, hey, look, you can't come because we got to protect the health of everyone, right? For all the right reasons. I want to ask this, and you tell me how comfortable you are answering this. How prepared was your university? And maybe you can even think about colleagues in other universities. How prepared were they to say, okay, we're going to be able to respond, take things online, and provide what our students need? Or was it just a holy smokes, we got to scramble? We're not even sure. And again, for everyone listening, I mean, we put on the eLearning Success Summit, in early 2020, and what we were hearing was just people were drinking from a fire hose because they just weren't ready for the type of change that this was forcing on them. But it seems like people have survived. So you tell me, what was that experience like, from the kind of professor perspective?
Yeah, I don't think there was really, I mean, about as prepared as everybody else was, and that is just, operating in an unfathomable situation, and still trying to maintain some sort of routine. You've got courses to teach. There's an obligation to finish them. There's the expectation that the students will go there. So it became so much more than just the content of the course, but also as an anchor for students to place and rely on something that could be consistent, between the life that they had before this happened and the life that came after. I know that the leadership in our university knew that something like this could happen. and there had been a lot of conversations at higher levels and amongst leadership about this sort of thing being able to happen. But of course, there was nowhere near the appreciation of the magnitude of what it could
Reality,
be
yeah, sure.
and what it became. To the credit of universities that were able to continue, I'd say that, and I think that was a lot, is that their course management systems, their learning management systems, for the most part, were able to kind of serve as the cornerstone of continuing the course, and then Zoom steps in and becomes, the all important, conduit for connecting people, sustaining virtual meetings, all of the backbone of how the university works, and the front end as well, how universities communicate with their students. But this became critical to making the back end run, so that everyone could still talk. I've had conversations, probably more direct lines to our senior leadership at our university through Zoom than I had when I was present on campus. And it just, being able to say, you're on Zoom, I'm on Zoom, I'm going to raise my hand, maybe I can have a brief exchange with one of our leaders. And that's interesting. But, in terms of preparedness, it all happened very quickly. There were a lot of people who were unprepared. I think the students, of course, it really just didn't know what was going to happen next, and a lot of us didn't know what was going to happen next. The best we could do was just try to take the online tools that were available to us at the time. For American University, that tool is Blackboard, and also use other means of being able to connect with everybody, and then just scale them up to something that could keep us together. And that was how it was all, improvised, in the spring semester for us.
Who was successful in as a part of your sort of faculty cohort? Was there a certain mindset? Was there a certain personality? Was there a certain age group? Were the younger
certainly.
professors more, like that they were easier to do this? Or I don't want to make super generalizations, but what was your impression of who was be able to be successful faster, and who's still struggling?
Yeah. I'd say on one level, in terms of just mastering the technology, yes, the younger faculty members had an advantage because it was just something that was more natural to them. And many faculty members don't use online tools at all, or use them very little. And so the necessity of having to kind of migrate everything to that to that side was really an enormous challenge for them. And not as much of an enormous challenge for me, because I was accustomed to this, but it was the intensity of it which stood out. And I'd say the intensity was really compounded by the circumstances around which all this took place, and having to go beyond just doing instruction, but also just providing grounding and
support. I mean, the psychological piece of this was, it's like, whoa, like the universe. It's not like we're having a 10-minute fire drill here, or even a 1-day fire drill. This is like the universe could potentially be changing right now. Yeah.
Yes. And everybody knew it, but it was, was no less important for those feelings to be acknowledged and to not just be shunted aside as, well, we're just going to carry on and nothing to be seen over there, all this chaos that's going on, and the fact that you can't come back to campus, or the fact that your classes are going to proceed this way, seniors aren't going to graduate in the traditional way, nothing to see there. Of course there was a lot to see there, and that had to be acknowledged somehow. So the intensity of it and the circumstances had to be recognized and confronted. I mean, they really had to be discussed openly in order for this to work. Now, I'm not saying that this is something that has to be like the level of intensity, I don't think is going to be sustained, going forward as this way of doing pedagogy accelerates. And I do think this accelerated things, very much. But what it does highlight is that there's a real palpable priority for the class to form a connection, right? For the person who's instructing and the person who's on the receiving end and all the students together. You've got to find a way. You may not be able to do it in the way that you do it in person, but you've still got to find an alternative that is palatable enough so that it can become a kind of complement to the whole course experience. You feel like you're gaining from your established connections with all these people. You're not just a number or a face or an email address. You're creating connections. So this is really one of the critical hurdles that anyone wandering into this world really needs to find an answer to, is just how do I create connection with people, like real felt connection with people, not just established, I hear you, do you hear me? Yes, okay, this can continue now. It has to go deeper than that. Some kind of human relationship that can be transmitted over this space.
It's amazing. We've been hearing it here where I am, as much as I'm sure everywhere else around the world, where people are just itching to just be with other people, right? And it's funny how just taking sort of the office experience, how people would, oh God, I don't want to do the commute, and going to the office is a pain in the butt. And people are finding real efficiencies in the work that they're doing right now, in terms of, oh, if I don't have to commute, or I don't have to go from meeting to meeting, it actually creates a lot of efficiencies all down that path. But the missing human element is becoming a real weight for many, many people. What's the immediate future? What's the discussion right now? I mean, you've got a cohort that's graduated. Actually, I know in June they've graduated. The first COVID class. What's the university talking about in terms of reopening and being physically present? And it's just sort of day by day still, or is there a plan in place that's like, here's how we're going to reconfigure classrooms, and here's how we're going to do that?
Yeah, everything is on the table. If you can think of it, it's probably being discussed.
There's a subcommittee
at universities. That's right. Well, yeah, I mean, like there, a host of subcommittees, and they're all tinkering with the pre-existing model to make it work in a time like ours. And here's what's important about that, Stephen, is it's not just about tinkering with the pre-existing model. It's also doing it in a way so that all institutional values, and also just kind of uniform professional values, and that run across the gamut of higher education providers, that they've got to adhere to, right? Like accessibility. That universities need to make sure that if they're going to make changes to the way that they do what they do, it's still got to be accessible. Watchwords on campuses right now are diversity and inclusion. How do you make sure that we can still accomplish university goals that we set for ourselves in the areas of diversity and inclusion, while also modifying the way we do our work. So it's got to somehow fit with the value system, the culture, and all the principles that preceded what's happening here. So that just compounds the challenge. It's more than just kind of reinventing. It's also kind of reinventing, but it also has to be compatible with all these other, pre-existing conditions. So, so there's that. And but I'll say, in back to the all options on the table thing, we shouldn't be surprised at any outcome at this point. I mean, it'd still be a shocker to think of coming to the fall and not having people returning to school as they normally do. But the return to school would be taking place online. There would be, no people in the classroom. It would all be, just farmed out online, and all of the gatherings, the social life, that's really a key, just a pillar of what makes the university run, would have to be rethought, so that it can still provide, life into the experience. So it's funny. It's just strange to think of how like if you're a campus that has students living on campus, how that's all going to happen. How, just because the university experience presumes large gatherings in classrooms, dormitories,
Sure.
at sporting events, at speakers and concerts, that all of that has to go away for a little while. So it's all going to be it's just all being negotiated right now, and universities are thinking very hard about the costs of doing so. Some universities have already called it, like the University of California. They will not be in the game in the fall of 2020. They are going to have the virtual campus.
Total virtual campus. Those campuses are just sitting empty.
That's right. Yeah. UCLA, UC Berkeley. But Purdue University, which has become a rising, really a notable player in both in-person but also virtual learning. Purdue University was the one that bought Kaplan. So they've found a way to brand something that wasn't a known higher education brand. It was more of kind of like a testing service brand, and now that has become a college brand. Okay. And that university is opening for business in the fall and taking a number of precautions. And the president of that university, Mitch Daniels, who's otherwise known as one-time governor of Indiana, now president of Purdue, has been very vocal about the need to. He's saying not only should we open campuses, but we would be negligent if we didn't.
Yeah. Wow, that's I assume that there's of the professorship of that cohort, there's opinions both ways. Yeah, there's some professors who are like, there's no way I'm coming back to class. There's no way I'm going to put myself in this situation. And then there's others that are like, are you kidding me? I got to get back in there. This is the only way this is the only way it works. Yeah. Sure.
All of those views exist, particularly, when it comes down to, people who just can't see themselves excelling in this role in any other way but in person. And then on the other side of the coin, you have somebody with an autoimmune disease or disorder who just can't risk it, and so, there's a very strong opposition to returning to a campus that's vulnerable.
Let's talk about some of the possible fallouts for universities at this stage right now. We've touched on some of them, but I kind of want to circle back directly. It's like, have we been experiencing, right now, usually you've got your whole cohort for, the new freshman class coming in. I mean, is that just sort of up in the air right now about will we have new students? Will we not have new students? Or do they have new students enrolling? What are those expectations? And then you said earlier about even students returning who are, somewhere in there, sophomores, juniors, seniors, whatever. Research grants, ability to perform research. Like and obviously all of this points to the dollars, right?
Yeah.
Like what other, talk to me about the potential fallout for a large university like AU, and which is
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, one of the um, the really illuminating parts to this whole saga for me has been learning about the pressures that a university faces, not just now, but on an annual basis, trying to meet its targets, right? And so every year a university goes through um, this dance with prospective families and students, trying to attract them to the university. Lately, for many universities, it's just been finding a way to just overwhelm their admissions with candidates, and then being able to select from just an obscenely large pool, which does a couple of things. One is it guarantees that classrooms will be full and dorms will be full and everything will be monetized, but it also gives the university the ability to put a relatively low admissions rate out there as a kind of mark of prestige. Like, so many people wanted to get in, only X number did, and because our initial pool was 50,000 or something crazy, so anyways, so this is the normal thing. Now, on top of all this, you have this year's situation, and so the word on everybody's mind right now in June of 2020 is melt, MELT. How much of this castle, right, that we have amassed with students having accepted and paid their deposits to come here in the fall, how much of that, under the heat of this pressurized situation that we're in, how much of that is going to melt away, right? How many of them are going to actually leave the pool of committed, paid, deposited students and do something else? And this happens, obviously. I mean, it's not uncommon for a student to commit to a university even in June and then turn around in August and say, you know what, I changed my mind, things changed.
But that's small. But that was traditionally has been a very small percentage.
Very small percentage. Now we're contemplating the possibility that this could actually be a quite large percentage, right? Mm-hmm. Because when whatever news comes down, right? If it's anything short of you're all coming back and we're going to have people living in dorms and you're going to attend classes in classrooms and lectures, anything short of that is going to, presumably cause a lot of students to think twice about the decision that they made. So that decision is being made, like there's a lot of deliberation going into the ramifications of an outcome that will be anything short of that. And the possibility, like working into its modeling, universities thinking about, well, if we did make this decision, how many students can we expect to lose? Now, a couple of months ago, when I was hearing from leadership about the future, many universities were building models of 25% attrition. That's an enormous amount of attrition for universities.
Writ large as well. This just isn't the incoming class. This is the whole student body.
Yeah. Just the whole student body. Just like 25% of them, 1 out of every 4, not coming back.
And in a business, I mean, that's like, hey, 25% revenue hit. That's a huge number. That's a massive number.
Yeah. It is a massive number, and so our university feels that it's not going to be that bad, but it's still going to be bad because especially for universities like mine, which are principally tuition driven, the news of lots of students choosing to go elsewhere or choosing not to go at all is the worst kind of news, right? Mm-hmm. So it's working very hard to try to preempt that sort of choice to being made, because ultimately this does fall down to choices, that if the university will be open in the fall, most universities that were open in the fall of 2019 will be open in the fall of 2020. It's just that it's going to look very different. And do you want to to be enrolled in that kind of thing? And do you want to pay the kind of money that you were that you have to pay to be enrolled in this university, but get
less value, like the package
less in
value.
return.
The value package is reduced at this stage right now.
Yeah. So no, I mean, ramifications fall out very much on the minds of administrators, leadership, boards of trustees. They're just, and no one knows.
So let me ask. So here's a tough question. Maybe it's sensitive. You tell me if you don't want to answer it. The tenured professor is a topic. This is one of those holy grail kind of things that you want to achieve as a tenured professor, right? You're locked. You're in. You've got your package. You're going in, and not only can you kind of choose your own research path, you can also, it's a nice place to get to in a career in higher education. Is this going to change that conversation? Is this going to, because those are expensive people.
Yeah,
you have to maintain. Or is this going to change that conversation in higher ed?
Well, again, I think what we've seen here is a process that was already unfolding, but this just got a shot of adrenaline, like just of the purest.
COVID has it's been an accelerant. It's been a catalyst that nobody saw coming. Yeah. Okay. Sure.
Yeah. I mean, things that we could see coming, right? But way down the road, or not that far down the road, but not now, and now it's here now, right? Mm-hmm. And another one of those things was the future of tenure, right? That what we had seen was a growth in the amount of commitments to what are called contingent faculty, faculty put under contract, not offered tenure, but offered a contract of a certain term, whose primary role in the university is to do a lot of teaching, but of course we want them to do research as well. So how can you find a way to still get all the fringe benefits, the maximum benefit from a fully pedigreed professional in higher education without having to pay the premium that you get for tenured faculty? And so a lot of universities have reserved those resources for what's known as star faculty, the ones who are like really, really sought after, who publish at a high level, who are able to obtain large research grants, and save the money for them. So there's a paradox here for universities who are figuring out what to do with those tenured faculty, because those are also the most expensive.
I'm just going to say, it seems like a conundrum, because we want our star players, but your star players are also the big, they have the big paychecks as well. So it's wow, do we really shrink down and preserve our dream team, or do we have a bigger offering?
That's right. And if you cut them, right, then which is really the last resort kind of thing that universities would do, because there are only two circumstances in which a tenured faculty member would be relieved of duty. One is that they were, ran afoul of the law, did something that was just
egregiously terrible. Yeah, I mean,
right, crossed, some sort of professional ethic. And then the other side of it was that universities are unable to pay them. That's the other situation in which a tenured faculty could be relieved.
Carol, we love you, but we can't. Got no. There's no more money.
That's right. We can't pay your $120,000 salary, whatever. And meanwhile, a university is getting 2.5 of that person, right, from the contingent faculty, right? So, and those contingent faculty carry the lion's share of the teaching. So who's going to teach these classes? Who's going to deliver my curriculum if I start relieving them? But the easy logic would be, well, if I have to make cuts, I'm going to cut the the faculty who have more malleable, we gave them contracts for this kind of situation, right? It could give us financial flexibility, that as we grow, we can bring on more, we can give them contracts, we can commit to them, for the future that we can foresee being able to fund their contract. And then if we cannot fund their contract, then we have an out, right? And a pretty easy out. Just can't pay you, contract canceled. Harder to do with a tenure faculty member, unless the direst of circumstances comes to light. Are we at that point? This is what we don't know for sure from universities, is just what kind of financial hit are they going to take, and of course the hits are going to be brutal, but are they brutal enough to invoke the language from universities that says, tenured faculty members, I can't even pay you, and so now we have to end that relationship on financial grounds.
Would there be a big enough groundswell? Let's just say that happens across a large number of universities, and obviously we're really kind of focusing our conversation in the United States, but I'm sure the same problem is happening in Europe, but around the world. Is this a big enough ecosystem where you look for that kind of bailout support or something like that from the government, or is that not even a thing, because the government already supports so much through the grant system and through the loan system? I don't know. It's a question just popped into my head. What do you think?
Well, I do know that some of at least the American bailout, went to higher education.
Okay.
Universities did get money from the federal government to offset the losses that they've incurred. Those are better than nothing, but not, certainly nowhere near enough to shore up universities whose operating budgets are hundreds of millions, billions of dollars. It's just not going to do it. And I think this is probably more challenging especially for private universities who do have enormously large budgets and don't have, on a regular basis, any kind of state funding to fall back on. What they rely upon is, large endowments, or tuitions like ours.
Does this have the potential to? It's not really a question. How do you think this fallout will create a larger gap, or create a gap, or change the landscape, change the conversation between someone who has a large endowment? Let's just use Harvard as an example. They came out. Now I'm remembering as well. As soon as I asked that question, they returned the $9 million bailout check, right? Because they're like, actually, probably not. We don't need that, right? But they've got some $40 billion in an endowment, to community colleges or other colleges that don't have that kind of endowment structure. Talk to me about what the thinking is around that, because I could also see where it's like, wait a second, as a community college, I'm local, I'm where the people are anyway. They don't want to travel. They don't want to go back. And so they may actually have an advantage in that regard, that they're the hometown. And so, hey, look, we at least offer you an opportunity to continue your higher education while you can't go back to the big campus. But at the same time, we're dealing with behemoth versus, it's a David and Goliath situation.
Yeah. Without a doubt, I would say this has really brought into sharper focus the full range of alternatives that is before somebody who wants to, get a higher education. And there's been lots of talk about the value of community colleges, of trying to find a way to elevate, strengthen community college systems so that it can translate, for the student who enrolls in that kind of school, into whatever path they want it to go into. It can be an automatic job as soon as graduating, or it can be a kind of an alternate route to the the state university, right? A way of getting into the system, whereas it would have been harder to do before. So, thinking about school in those kind of those starker transactional terms,
Mhm.
where I think is certainly on the minds of many, has been for a long time, but more so now, because you have to think and think again about what you're getting for your money when the proposition has changed, right?
Mhm.
Especially for the on-campus experience. But so again, another trend that I think was unfolding, but is certainly accelerating. I, for one, feel like the marquee names of higher education will always be there. They'll always be Harvard. They'll always be MIT. The most prestigious state universities, the most prestigious international universities. Those names will be there. And then there's like
for a reason.
yeah, that's right. Then they transcend place, honestly. I mean, like it's at this stage, if I can easily see an individual, being given a spot at Princeton and then being told 2 months later, well, sorry, we can't have you on campus, and be like, I don't care. Now, if that person was fortunate enough to have a choice between Princeton and, say, Yale, then maybe they say, okay, well, Princeton didn't open, but Yale does, so I'm going to go to Yale. Right. Yeah, I guess
those are champagne problems, my friend.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think that's going to happen. But anyway, I think this is kind of what is going to sustain the marquee names of higher education. They're going to,
because
survive.
At the end of the day, even if you did the online experience, you still are going to graduate with a degree.
Yes.
That says Princeton, Harvard, Yale, MIT, Ivy League, what, and that's going to have cred. That's going to have street cred. And although one of the big conversations that we're not going to be able to get into is this graduating class of 2020 right now, they're looking at this cliff of job opportunities, right? I mean, and unfortunately, that's a whole another box that needs to be opened and talked about. It's like, what is the outcome? Okay, great, you've got this great degree. Oh, and all that debt that you just incurred. What are you going to do now, right?
I have to pull my my paper marking. What am I trying to say? I have to just call you out for saying that there's a whole nother. There's no such thing as a whole nother, Stephen.
There's just another.
It's a whole other. There is no
whole
other.
Damn, schooled. I was just schooled.
There's no nothers.
I'm going to start using irregardless too. That's what I'm going to put on the table too. Oh, irregardless of that, Professor Kelley.
I had to do it.
Oh, that's so great. I love it. What the thing while you were talking about sure, the marquee names will stay marquee names. They're institutions. They're going and unless there's another wave that just really takes us into phase 2 of, oh crap, what next? Sure, they're going to survive. I just, what came through my mind is what the real winner here may be the commuter college, right? So there was a brief time in my life, I went to the University of Colorado at Denver. There are dorms at that college, but it's a big campus, right? There's tens of thousands of people who show up to take classes there. And, it's a commuter college for a reason. People drive in, they take their classes, and then they either go to work or they come after work. And, so it's the expectation of what you're getting from that kind of university is very different than the come to campus, live on campus, sort of take these 3 to 4 years, maybe 5 to 6 years, and have that life. So I don't know. I'm just kind of putting it out there as a data point.
Well, it could be. I don't know. I just feel like it really blows the field wide open now that, whomever is out there and is the most agile, who is the most innovative, the one who can come up with the right combination of connecting with people through the virtual platform, but also give them an education that they feel like they're getting a lot out of, and that degree, when it's done, actually means something. Like if they can get all those things, provided that this individual goes into that whole relationship with the institution, believing in the whole, the value of getting this kind of degree. So they go and do it, and then they come out of it. And if there's somebody out there who is agile enough, I mean, so two, things that have been always playing over and over again in my mind, two aphorisms. Like, one of them is necessity is the mother of invention, right?
Mm-hmm.
Plato. And then the other one is Joseph Schumpeter, creative destruction. That and both of these are kind of gathered around innovation. That when we innovate, we are motivated to innovate by need, but at the same time, when we are innovating, we are also tearing down the thing that
challenging.
existed
And it doesn't,
before.
so that you can say it in a more positive way, right? You're not necessarily tearing it down directly, but you're presenting a very strong challenge. It's just,
Yes.
I mean, take something everybody knows. Uber challenged the taxi business, right?
Mhm.
I mean, it presented such a value proposition that it was a massive, massive challenge to a high degree, that it's, Lyft and Grab and all these other brands that are out there. But yeah, so innovation, especially when it comes up with a solution that people find real value in, and they see a new way to solve that problem, it challenges that old system, and that's when it starts to tear it down, right?
Yeah,
for sure, absolutely. So let's spin that as a positive. What have you?
Yeah,
what are you doing?
It could be.
Like, what have you seen? What are you doing? What are some of the bright points on the horizon that you see coming out of this, or that you've been implementing, or that you've seen colleagues implementing about, hey, being online is not so bad, or wow, there's some efficiencies I've created, or what are some of the great things that are coming out of this?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So I'm doing a little micro experiment right now, and it's not really an experiment. I'm not like, conducting any kind of
you don't have a
study
control
about
trial,
this. but it's just my observations, really. So I've taught the same course every summer, which begins immediately after the end of the school, the physical in-person school year, and it's a pure online course, and as as the years have gone by, I've always packaged into my my expectations about how the course would go a certain amount of attrition, that there would just be a small group of students who have never taken a class purely online before. They don't quite know how to do it because they didn't anticipate the problem of not being in the classroom as a means of just getting their head on
focused. Getting focused.
The matter at hand.
When you show up for the classroom, you have to be on. You're in. Somebody's looking
Right.
at you. That stuff, right?
Yeah, in some way. I mean, like, even if it's just kind of passively, like, you're there. You made the decision to go. You probably thought about what it is that you needed to prepare to do it, and even if you're not prepared, you still thought about it. And so just the requirement that you show up is enough to get people to kind of, for the most part, stay pretty responsible with it. With an online course, of course, like, you have to really motivate yourself. Like, there is no showing up. There's really just logging on, and if you don't log on and show up in the virtual way, then you're not going to get what you enrolled for, and I'm going to notice, but I have no real way of being able to get in your face if you switch me off, right? So that's or you never log on. So so every year I would see that kind of attrition. 3 or 4 students just underestimating how hard this was going to be, and they decided to travel while taking the class, or they went to a place where the internet connectivity was poor and they just didn't prepare very well and they had to drop the class. They disappeared, so I see that. I've seen that. Now this year I'm teaching this same summer class on the heels of all students having experienced online classes, and I find that there's just, I don't know, maybe it's just something that's in the air, that or just kind of unspoken between me and the students, but I'm not getting that same kind of attrition, and it seems like everybody is just a bit more at ease with what's going on, and that I think is going to be a major factor at making this work.
So COVID really was just a collective global human hazing moment.
Right.
I mean, it's just like, you're in the frat now, or you're in the sorority now. Get your stuff together, and here you are. Okay,
yes,
you're either going to show up or you're not going to show up. And
yes, if we want to call it an initiation, it's an initiation to hell.
Well,
and
yeah, but it's so interesting that you can spin it either way, right? And that's why I wanted to sort of end our conversation with some of these positives that. Yeah. Holy smokes! For on the professional side of it, how many conversations, I don't know if you've had, but from my wife and other people that we have around us, they're just like, what is weird, because we're working from home. I feel like I'm working more. There's more meetings. There's more time. I'm actually more overwhelmed right now working from home than I was at the office, simply because people they're more demanding. They are just sitting around. Your boss is just kind of sitting there and they have nothing to do other than sort of task, blah, blah, blah. Right. And there's any number of things. And so that's, I guess I just painted a negative, not a positive, but I think some of the positive things that have come out of it are, okay, we are forcing some of the conversations about tenure, about, to just tuition in general and the cost of a higher education and the value that you receive from it.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. I'll just, if I can, just interrupt you for a second, because it's on my mind. I don't want to forget it. Is I think this is forcing universities to think, always about efficiencies. How do we take what we do and make it more efficient? Do we need the large lecture hall? The lecture hall that has 200 students, where there really isn't a whole lot of, repartee between the instructor and the student. We could probably just put this online, right? And maybe that does it. Now think about that. Think about, eliminating from your campus the large lecture. And now you don't need to plan for that when you're building your buildings. You don't need, you can use that space and reallocate it somehow, repurpose it. And so I would be in favor of that, thinking of a way of just kind of making more efficient the way we do our work, that there are just some things that maybe can be done just as effectively, maybe even more effectively, using this method than having everybody gather in large spaces. So that could be a positive that comes out of this for sure.
I think, well, and you've sort of circled this all the way back to kind of my first question about MOOCs, right? Are there certain introductory courses? Are there certain, prerequisites or whatever that you farm out, to, hey, look, you just got to get this done. You got to show me that you've gone through the material and that you can pass the assessments in order to come to the small cohort class or whatever. And you just create massive efficiencies around that, rather than even putting those in the schedule, right? These are all prereqs that you've got to come just done with, right? Because that's, like, especially I'm thinking like rudimentary math and, writing skills and these kinds of things that, do we need to have the seminar lecture hall to do that? That we don't necessarily need that anymore. Or maybe that's something we can discover an innovation around now to deliver that in a different way. And at the end of the day, maybe we find that even brings us back and enhances the university experience. Again, to circle us back to the beginning, where if you think, 200, 300 years ago, and again, I'm focusing on the United States because that's where we're both from, but it was that experience where your family sent you away to the university, and you'd literally leave home and you would go to some very small campus at that stage, and you would literally apprentice with a professor for 3, 4, 5, 6 years to become a doctor, a lawyer, a whatever, right? And that was the university thing. You would read and you would converse. Maybe this takes us closer back to that place where the experience and the environment really becomes even more higher value. And the other technical stuff, those little things that we sometimes get lost in, can be accomplished in another way. I don't know.
Yeah. It could. Universities are going to have to think hard about, the things that, that command the largest shares of their bottom lines, and is there another way for us to do those things? And, in this sense, it could be helpful for American universities to look abroad and see how others do it. That doesn't have to be a large, kind of nuclear campus where you have a quad or, the student union or whatever, just on a large parcel of land, and then it's just kind of like a little community around all this, or can it look different from that? I did my undergraduate work at Tufts University, which has a kind of that kind of school, and kind of the classic New England liberal arts sense, on a hill with a lot of old brick buildings, right, and a fence, and then I went to, and it's outside of Boston, but it's kind of in its own little community. And then I did my doctoral work in London at the London School of Economics, and I was kind of floored by the fact that the LSE really had a very small footprint in the city of London. It's grown a little bit since I was there, but not that much, and certainly not at all like what you see in those more kind of contiguous micro communities that the universities are in the United States. And what that means is, okay, well, a lot of the students that go here don't live on campus, meaning we don't provide student housing and we don't provide them with food. They go get that elsewhere. In the meantime, what that means is that we can kind of we can keep down the cost of running the university and the costs that we pass on to the students to enroll. So now there's a lot of kind of other structural matter that goes with making that possible that is foreign to how the American university business model works. But that's, as with everything on the table right now in terms of future, you've got to look at these other possible efficiency, routes as well. But that's me. Like, I haven't talked about what I actually do for my scholarship, but just full disclosure, I am not an international business person, and I'm not an economist, and I really shouldn't be talking about this stuff, business models and value propositions. I'm a historian, right? Full disclosure, but this is me, like, just kind of absorbing. I have in one form or another been either on the receiving end or on the dispensing end in higher education, or the administrative kind of back end management area of higher education. I've been in that role for most of the last 30 years, so I can say that I've had a lot of touch points with
absolutely,
and seen it evolve.
I want to end with this question, and I hope that there's something pops to your mind. Is there an aha moment or an oh crap moment that you'd be willing to share from your online teaching experience, where it's like aha in terms of, hey, wow, I'm going to have to design the course in this way to get this kind of outcome or this kind of result, or like an oh crap moment where it's like, you know what, that was a ginormous fail and I never need to do that again. And maybe that's one of maybe that's one of the same. Okay, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I'll say that from year 1 to year 2 of doing my online education, there was a steep learning curve. And one of the big takeaways from year 1 was the amount of attention paid to leading my students through the wilderness of this course, right? And just being a guide for them, leaving nothing unknown or mysterious to them. Because again, like in the same way that them showing up into the classroom is a kind of an instant concentration type of thing, it's also an instant touch point for us as professors too, that we can just kind of as an aside just be like, oh yeah, this thing I almost forgot about the paper that's due next week. Okay guys, let me just, or they can ask the questions,
Right.
We can have live engagement. Well, all of that, again, like if I'm not on, right, then they just proceed through the course not knowing, and the impact of that is much larger, when you're doing it online. So I think that was, I'll call it an aha moment, that like, aha, like if I'm really just like on top of, their questions every moment, if I leave nothing to chance, everything is known, like just lay out all the instructions really simply. And this is how I structure my online courses. I just say, okay, here's week 3. Do this, then this, then this, and it's laid out like a recipe, like in more specific detail than you would ever find on my syllabi, or even on my companions to my in-person classes that I have on my Blackboard sites. This is everything is just kind of laid out so that you can't mess it up. Wondering. Yeah, you're not wondering about anything. And if you are wondering about anything, and one of the things that I've done in the last year is create my own little Ask Me Anything thread on my discussion board, is just say, like, look, this you can just like toss any question at, whether it's just, about me.
There's an innovation right there. I mean,
just put it on that's right.
Just I'm available, maybe not in a public forum like Twitter, right? Or on a Facebook thing or something like that. But hey, look, I'm going to create an AMA in the university's platform, if it's Canvas or Moodle or whatever it is.
Yep.
You're one of my students. Look, I pay attention to this thread.
Yeah.
Throw your question up there and I will answer it, or my research assistant will answer it, whatever it is.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And that's
huge.
Probably
that's
more
huge.
than anything else, that's just assurance that, I am always paying attention, and you will get a response within X amount of time every time. And so you never have to worry about being lost. So that assurance, the assurance of never being lost, was my big aha between year 1 and year 2, and it served me well ever since. Just I feel like that's, you'd have to ask my students, I guess, but I feel like the thing that goes really well with, I feel like I don't get a lot of students, at least in my evaluation, saying I had no idea what I was supposed to do at this point or that point. It's just constant communication, instruction, never wondering what happens next.
Awesome. Professor Kelley, you and I could talk for the next 3 hours, but I'm gonna wrap it up here. I feel like we just entered into a moment of talking about what works and what doesn't work in the online class and those kinds of things. Maybe that's another conversation we'll have, but thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show today. I really, really appreciate it. Wish you all the best.
Yeah, sure thing. This has been a real pleasure, and see you around on Zoom.
Thanks again for tuning into today's episode of the eLearning Podcast. If you like what you've learned today in this episode, I encourage you to either follow us or subscribe to us on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube. And please do share this episode with 1 or 2 of your colleagues or friends. Also, I just want to remind you that you can level up your online learning game with all of the information that's available at the eLearning Success Summit. You can get your free ticket at elearningsuccesssummit.com. And finally, you can also stay up to date on everything that's important, all the news and the resources for e-learning professionals at lmspulse.com. Get our free newsletter by just going to lmspulse.com today. Thanks again.